Before the Ranger Creed is recited by a formation of Rangers at any ceremony, you will always hear the narrator say this: "Will all Rangers, past and present, please join us as we recite the Ranger Creed?" Every Ranger will stand, and as they say those six stanzas, they are transformed back to a time when they had the pleasure and the burden of this brotherhood. That feeling is hard to describe. However, it's one that never leaves you. It's a connection that spans the globe and can be reignited when you hear the phrase, "Hey, Ranger, what battalion you from?" Amongst this formation, there are Rangers that stand out. They are legends of this elite organization, and when their names are spoken, people instantly have a story and for a moment relive it. Legends of the 75th podcast wants to capture that feeling and those stories. We want to ensure that these legends' triumphs and sacrifices never fade away. So sit back with your favorite adult beverage and listen to stories from the Legends of the 75th. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Legends of the 75th. If you're listening to this podcast, it means that I'm coming in screaming hot from Operation Cabanatan, and we had an amazing time in the Philippines. And I'm just going to go ahead and predict the future. No one died, so that's always a good Ranger mission that we do that. We brought everybody back with us. But anyway, we have an absolutely amazing episode because I get to get back into my groove of something that I love to do and I used to do back in the days of Always in Pursuit. I get to sit down and talk about a book. I not only do I get to talk about a book, but I get to talk about a book that's talking about leadership and change management and how you go into organizations, you manage yourself, understand yourself, you persevere through difficult circumstances so that you can actually climb to the top and get the things done that you need to get done with focus, intent, and the passion that you really, really, truly need to have in order to get them done. And we are setting some first in this Legend of the 75th podcast. So first, we have Brandon Young. Many of you might remember him. We sat down with him and his brother from another mother, Justin Vinny, who's one of my all-time favorite human beings that's ever walked the face of this earth. But if you don't know Brandon, he was an Army Ranger as well. He served with me. We served together, and he had a total of four combat deployments. So if that's not quite enough, just that we have Brandon on as a second-time guest, the first one ever, we also have Blayne Smith. So if you don't know Blayne Smith, he is a former he graduated from West Point. He was a West Point graduate. And here's the kicker, okay? He's also a Special Forces officer. He never served in the 75th, but he did get his Ranger tab. And by proxy of being associated with Brandon and all the amazing things that he's done in amazing companies like Red, White, and Blue, we allowed him to come on the podcast. It was also super helpful that he wrote a book in conjunction with Brandon Young. So now that I've introduced them and I've talked a little bit about the book and I've been a really, really good hype man. All right. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We are
I'm
going to spend
pumped.
the majority of the podcast talking about their book, Perseverance Over Endurance. Okay. And this book, and I talked a little bit before these gentlemen hopped on. It's a crapshoot. All right. I'm just going to be honest with our audience. Okay. Military guys writing about leadership. Are you going to get a fucking Jocko? Who knows? Okay. Are you going to get a Simon Sinek? Simon Sinek, he gets a lot of credit, but what's the so what, Simon? That's what I always ask myself at the end of the book every time I finish them. Like, what are we doing here, man? Like, what can I do to apply that to my life? So, it's kind of a crapshoot. What you're going to get with military guys. Is it going to apply to civilian life, especially when you talk about transition? That's probably the hardest space to talk about in the military. How are you going to transition out of the military? How are you going to do it well? How are you going to not survive? How are you going to thrive? It's a delicate, delicate, delicate balance. And I just have to say, Brandon, Blayne, you guys freaking nailed it, man. This is a book that I will purchase en masse and I will hand out to people because it applies to civilians, it applies to military transitioning member, people currently serving in the military, and people that are in all levels of leadership across the entire Army. I've referred you guys to some other podcasts that I don't refer people to. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
Yeah.
That I think you need to go on because I see so much value in this book. So before we kind of start deep diving into it, I just want to say, congratulations, gentlemen.
Dude,
It's
thank
absolutely
you, man.
amazing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks,
Uh,
brother. Appreciate you.
well,
That means a lot. It means a lot to us coming from you, especially because I know you're a student of the game. You spend a lot of time, out there leading people. You have spent a lot of time out there leading real human beings. You have seen a lot of looks and you study this stuff inside and out. So it means a lot to us in that context. But in addition to that, Blayne and I talk all the time about if the guys that we served with, if our brothers and sisters, that are out there, people that we actually did the real work with, can look back at us and say, job well done. It's cheese, dude.
Yeah.
We've accomplished what we've hoped for, and we've also done so in a way that hopefully honors and respects our heritage.
No, I think you did a great job at that, to be honest with you. It was pretty amazing. You guys weren't, yeah, this is something we talk about at Legends all the time. If you're gonna tell a war story, why? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing it for? What's the so what? And especially Blayne, some of the stuff that you talk about in this book, you weren't telling the story just to tell the story. You were telling it because the deep self-reflection that you did, on the backside, how you learned a lot about yourself, you learned a lot about your team. You had to check your ego, which is probably, one of the biggest things that leaders need to do. And there was just so many tangibles that came out of that. It was really, really well done, Blayne.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, the stories are not particularly flattering of me, certainly at places, and I
Yeah,
don't really love
that's
talking
what
about
makes it
that stuff.
harder. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they're not my favorite stories to tell by any means, but I feel like it was necessary in this particular case, so I hope people get a lot out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think will. People will, and I know I definitely did. Well, gentlemen, so like I talked about in the first 20 minutes, let's just talk a little bit about, you guys, your backgrounds. I did very holistic stuff. You guys did a lot of stuff in between. But and then also, just kind of how you guys got together and you started the company, Applied Leadership Partnership.
Yeah, for sure. I'll get us started here. So both of us cut our teeth on leadership in the special operations world in the military. I joined right after high school, was after going through RIP and, getting my bag smoked by the likes of guys like Jay Hall and Rich Thompson. Got
Rich
to,
Thompson.
yeah, man. got, I told him actually last time I saw him, I said, we called you Sergeant Baywatch, right? And he's
That's
like,
funny.
yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, love those guys that are legends that, put me through RIP and all of us through RIP. I mean, I was assigned to 275. I grew up there. Did multiple rotations, like you said, ended up going down and being a RIP instructor as we were part of the transition into RASP and adding in the marksmanship weeks and everything else that became what is now just a top-notch assessment and selection program. Also got a chance to do some pre-ranger course instructor stuff, preparing some of the future leaders of the regiment. So did all of that. The upshot of it all is that I ended up getting out of the military around 2009. In parallel, I won't tell too much of Blayne's story, but graduated high school, went to West Point, served as a brigade reconnaissance troop platoon leader out in Iraq in 2004. Then led a team of Green Berets from the 3rd Special Forces Group out in FOB Anaconda in Afghanistan. And, you
Wow.
mentioned this already. I'm just going to briefly touch on this. Like, probably one of the most powerful recollections of a combat leader and the humility and just true grit and courage you will read in Blayne's reflection. It's incredible. I promise, Blayne, I won't gush on you, my brother from a different mother.
No, go on.
You like, I just keep coming all episode, but I'll do a little bit of it. But the upshot of it all is that we got out of the military in '09 and then Blayne in 2010, and we met as sales representatives working for a cancer diagnostic subdivision of Quest Diagnostics. So, largest laboratory in the world, large healthcare organization. And Blayne and I got out of the military because we had experienced obviously a lot in a very small amount of time. And we were trying to figure out how to be, quote, normal people out in the world. And so, here we are in our suits and ties and, going in and out of medical offices, trying to, represent our services well, trying to figure out like, how do we be real people out in the world now? And we met at a national sales meeting at a Florida hotel. It was kind of like, this guy's like, we're operating on the same frequency. Like, let's, I probably was all but close to saying, can we be friends? And so we
Do we
just
just become best friends?
We just became exactly. So we became friends, and about a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, Blayne left the organization to become the very first employee of what at the time was an idea veteran upstart called Team Red, White, and Blue.
Yeah, it's
Um,
amazing, Blayne.
Amazing organization. By the time he then conned me to come over and join him, I took a 60% pay cut and joined him there. And we did great things, man. We built strategic partnerships with the likes of the Nikes, the Microsofts, the Oakleys, the Walmarts. I could go on. We helped 150,000 veterans reconnect over 200 cities across the United States, help them live richer lives. So really got our hands dirty in the work of post-service reintegration. And the truth of how we started Applied Leadership Partners is that we kind of went our separate ways after that for a bit, came back together, saw a gap in the marketplace. There are stacks and stacks and stacks of books, and there's a lot of great stuff out there, but there's typically a gap between information and application, and we wanted to see if we could bridge that gap. And the other true part of the origin story is that we tried to talk each other out of doing this for about a decade. It finally didn't stick, and so we started Applied Leadership Partners in March, literally 4 days before the world shut down for COVID, and we had to take some of our own medicine and figure out how to persevere through adversity.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a hell of a time to start a business, right?
Yeah, I think we had 3 gigs on the books, and then like 3 days later, we had nothing. And so, we did what we thought we could do best. And I don't know if others would share in this experience, but I know for us, we felt like it was the first time we were on the sidelines of an American crisis in our lifetime,
Hmm.
and we wanted
Yeah.
to do something. And so, we had just started this company, so we literally hung free 60-minute consulting sessions on our website and just said, whatever, wherever you are, whatever you're doing out there, this is what we're about. We're here to help create, tightly knit, high performing teams that are ready to achieve in a complex world. You tell us what you're dealing with. And brother, we talked to teachers, insurance salesmen, government officials, nonprofit executives, you name it. People were coming from left and right, and it was awesome because we could help talk about some of this core conceptual stuff about, perseverance is greater than endurance, and how we have to adjust and grow as leaders, especially when, we come up against the shit that wasn't in the brochure. And yeah, I mean, and that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Blayne, I think Brandon hit on something there. I can only imagine, everybody that starts a business, especially like a partnership, like sky's the limit. You're fired up, you're bouncing ideas off of each other, you're texting each other at 1 o'clock in the morning. Your wives are starting to get mad because you're like, who you talking to? She sounds atrocious, all this different kind of stuff, because you're just
Well, she's a
excited.
he.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Brandon, for picking that up with you. But you know, and then all of a sudden COVID hits. Talk about checking your ego. Like, where do we go from here? You're probably not familiar with her, but Pema Chodron, she's a Buddhist monk. She was one of the very first American Buddhist monks. She has a saying. She says, you really, really start to understand the world and your place in it when in trying to figure out when you're going to land when the rug's pulled out from underneath you. Okay. And I
Yeah.
probably butchered the exact quote, but you get the premise behind it. And it's been a long time since I've quoted her. Pulled that from like the way resources of my mind.
Way
But
to hip
anyway,
fire that.
Good pull. Yeah, good pull.
yeah. But anyway, my point is I'd love for you to kind of talk about, just because it's going to feed more what we're going to talk about in this book. Just checking your ego and going, okay, we've got to figure this out. But the world's falling apart, as Brandon said. America's in crisis. What are we going to do here?
Yeah, there were a couple of phrases that we reminded each other of a lot in that time, and they were respect the moment and be generous.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
Brandon didn't mention this, but his wife Kelly was working in the emergency room at a hotel, geez, at an emergency room at a hospital during
Wow.
COVID. So she was very much on the front
Oh,
line
that's
of what
right. I
was
do
going
know
on.
that. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so Brandon's kind of holding down the fort while she's out doing that. And my wife is in the Intel community. So she was working at SOCOM in Tampa. So our wives were still going to work every day, um, which, you know, on one hand was interesting as two kind of barrel chested freedom fighters to see our wives leaving the house every day during COVID and going to work while we're kind of staying home, writing blogs and trying to figure out this business that hasn't really started yet. Um, and the other thing that was tough is Brandon said just about being on the sidelines is just not feeling like we had much control over how things were going to go, when things were going to change, what it was all going to look like on the other end. And I think somehow being able to make peace with that level of uncertainty and that lack of control or ability to kind of bend the situation to our will was a little foreign to us. So we just said, hey, we need to respect the moment. We can't change what's going on right now. A lot of people are going through an awful lot, and then we need to be generous. And so rather than panic and think about, you know, scurrying to go find a job or figuring out how we're going to make this thing pay, you know, we were lucky. We had wives with jobs. We had some things going on. I had been doing a little bit of consulting, so we weren't going to miss a mortgage payment, fortunately. And we just took the opportunity to say, hey, this could be going better, but it could also be going a lot worse. And so, where do we fit into that? And we started, like Brandon said, doing some free consulting. We started writing a lot and sharing things with people and just figuring out how can we lend a voice that is encouraging and useful to people in this time. And that's really where we even came up with this idea of perseverance being greater than endurance, because Brandon and I were fortunate enough to have gone through some things in our lives where we had reached kind of the extent of our endurance. We had been pushed past that line in our lives. So we knew what that felt like and we knew what it looked like and smelled like. But most people don't, if we're being honest. Most people,
Yeah.
especially capable, talented people, you know, they can grit their teeth and like, you know, put their shoulder to the wheel and get through some really hard stuff. But there's a lot of people who are good at doing hard things. But most people don't get to that point where they're just kind of at the end of the rope and they have to truly transform. You know, guys like us have been through some of that. And so we could see it plain as day. We saw leaders who we liked and cared about, um, you know, doing all the things they were used to doing, enduring, using their talent, using their intellect to try to get through things and just kind of white knuckling it. And then it's, you know, 2 weeks to stop to flatten the curve, right? And then it's we'll be in church by Easter. And then it's everyone's coming back to the office on the 4th of July. And that sort of thing reminded me an awful lot of SFAS. I was like,
Mm.
oh, you know what?
Oh, okay.
The thing about SFAS that makes it so hard for most people isn't that it's physically brutal. I mean, it's hard, but what makes people drop out is they don't know what's coming tomorrow and they don't know how they're doing. And so they
Yeah.
can't reference themselves and they can't control it. And it makes people go nuts. And I just started seeing that everywhere I was looking. And Brandon's like, oh, this is like the unknown distance march.
Yeah.
This is like,
And
hey, walk
or the
until we
best
tell you to
ranger
stop.
competition. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And so we just had this kind of light bulb moment at the whiteboard one day, and we're like, oh, this is what's happening. And I tell you, having that insight gave me a lot of
Hmm.
peace because I was like, we do now have something we can contribute. We need to figure out a way to bring this to life and share it with people. But this is like the core insight that I think we at least need to share is letting people know, like, hey, you can't just white knuckle and endure this. You're going to have to adapt and grow and transform and do that with a certain level of acceptance if you're going to have a chance to move forward through this because you don't know when things are going to change or what they're going to look like on the other side. And you're going to have to learn to make peace with that. And that kind of birthed an awful lot from that.
Well, I definitely want to come back and talk more about the acceptance and the reflection and the maturity and
Sure.
the wisdom that it takes to be able to really be able to do something with that. Because Blayne, you know, you said something that most people can. I would one up that a little bit that most people can, and they do actually reach a breaking point. They just don't know they've reached their breaking point, and they don't
That's
have
a
the
really
tools
good
and the
point.
they don't have the tools and the mechanisms, the self reflection and the maturity to go, whoa, what am I doing here? What is this even fulfilling my purpose? I mean, I've had to do this in my life, you
Yeah.
know, as well. Many of us have, you know. So you know, just you know, and I want to come back to that, but before that is you know working to okay, so you know you both kind of told your individuals, you know, but working together in a business that's like this, but more importantly, writing a book together. Oh man. Okay, I know Justin Vinny very well, and I know Brandon very well. But I've also seen that they've almost gotten into fist fights on countless occasions as well.
It's true.
So I can't even imagine doing this together, because Brandon's a difficult human being to be around. That would actually.
Those are your words, not mine, Mike. Okay.
I'm just kidding. I love Brandon. No, but I
Concur.
mean, just talk about this relationship and quite
Yeah.
frankly, how it's probably, individuals do, but you guys have probably reached almost kind of a breaking point too, and you've had to figure out new ways to persevere through it.
Very much so, and it's worth pointing out that we've had a really interesting journey over the last 16 years in the sense that we were peers together.
Yeah.
Then I worked for Blayne directly, and then and all this time we've been friends, and then came back together to actually form a business. And just a couple of things that I'd share with you is that it was more than um, you know guiding themes that we have. One of our or two of our company guiding themes are, we bet on ourselves and we walk in faith. And we bet on ourselves was something that we had really taken to task back in the team red, white, and blue days. Because when we first started it, everybody was telling us what we should be doing. You should be doing employment. You should be doing homelessness. You should be doing education benefits for veterans. And we were just like, you know what? We're not actually asking anyone for permission.
Yeah.
We know that veterans need to
Oh
increase
man.
their
Oh yeah.
health. We need
Yeah.
to increase their sense of purpose. We need to increase their engaged citizenship. We need to increase their connection to others. We're not asking anybody for permission because I'll tell you what, we have the education, we have the house, we have the job, and on the surface, everything looks like it's perfect, but we are like hurting on the inside. And
Yeah.
so we didn't ask people for permission. But these things don't just happen by accident. I literally got on a plane. God bless Kelly for, being encouraging and saying like, yeah, go do this. I didn't have a job. I had left my previous job in October. I started grad school. I didn't have a plan. I didn't think that we were going to, start writing a book together, let alone start a company together. But went out to Tampa and we really took it seriously. We had like a 2.5 day business meeting. We had an agenda. One of the things on the agenda, Mike, was difficult conversations.
Mm.
What needs to be said? What are the things that have not been said that need to be said in order for us to actually, no kidding, do this and move forward? And we really have maintained that throughout the course of our business, which thankfully we're almost, it'll be 5 years very soon, our anniversary. We've worked with a lot of great people and we continue to work with more. But we kept that theme going in the writing of the book and every bit of content that we have written at this point in time, which we do a lot of work with executive teams, with frontline leaders up to executive teams. We have something like 25 modules of leader development, which are as practical as difficult conversations and as kind of more nuanced as, perseverance or leading through uncertainty.
Mhm.
But everything we have written together. And it always starts with us kind of, as Blayne likes to say, getting into the lab and taking these big words and these big concepts that people wrestle with and kind of saying like, what the hell does that actually mean? And so
Yeah.
what? What do we actually do with it? And that's how it starts. The process, the writing process for us really starts is going back into the lab, taking a need set that we're seeing in the marketplace. For example, perseverance is greater than endurance. We literally had the people from a very large multinational medical organization who are on the front lines of rolling out the COVID tests ask us, can you come alongside us and help us we're really struggling here and we need to know how do we navigate all of these ups and downs? And it always starts with that. We bring it to the lab and then we start writing together, Blayne.
Yeah. All right. So I want to pause this for 1 second. Hey, I just want to let everybody know that this is just a preview of the deeper conversation we're about to dive into, not only in their journey as a business, but then also writing the book and then more content about the book. If you want to listen to the rest of the episode, please go over and sign to be an exclusive member. You can not only unpack the rest of this conversation, but then also many, many other conversations that we've had with over 55 guests in the Legends of the 75th and just a special shout out to is also you can watch the videos as we've done some of the creative meetings that have led to Operation Kabanaton, the film project. So there's a lot of content on there, and we're just adding more and more as time goes on. All right, so now let's dive into some of the core principles of the book.